Hello, everyone. It's the old man in digital world. I'm back again. I know it's sporadic when I'm on this channel, and I apologize about that. But I have a lot to do with the political commentary, which is what I mainly do here on YouTube and for the last 17 years. But I do take time out to do entertainment, to enjoy myself, just like you do. And I generally do it with anime. So I wanted to talk about something, as you can see in the background of the screen, a TV show called Hit Monkey. Now, this came out at the end of 2022. You may have been noticing that everyone at the time was talking about Witcher Origins. They were talking about Rings of Power. They were talking about all the really, really bad television, Willow, that was out there. And really, I didn't watch any of it. In fact, I don't own any streaming service. I don't watch the regular TV channels, ABC, CBS, NBC. I don't watch anything cable. I don't watch any of that. But I do watch anime. I do watch YouTube videos. So I'm familiar with that stuff. But I had the opportunity after my birthday, thanks to my sister, thank you, to have a chance to go over to Hulu, and I saw this show, Hit Monkey. So it's animation, but it's not quite anime. It's definitely not what you expect from Marvel. And I said, hey, I want to sit down and watch this. Maybe it's good, because I saw the trailer and it seemed interesting. Well, I did watch it. Watched the entire series. Binged right on through it. And you know what? I don't think enough people are talking about this. It's a great show. I think it's worth watching. And I want to do a little bit of a review of episode 1 and the series overall to an extent. And if you like this, I'll do more. I promise I will do more of these. But let's talk about the background of Hit Monkey himself. Hit Monkey is actually an official character. This is canon. He's part of Marvel Comics, Earth 616, which means he's a character that you will see right alongside other characters like Spider-Man and Deadpool and Domino. He's in the comic books. He's a real character. So we know that Hit Monkey is he's not an original character made for the Hulu series, but he is a Marvel character. And the thing is, he's dark. He's not like most Marvel heroes or anyone we see in the Marvel movies. You know, a Captain America, an Iron Man, a Hulk or Thor. God forbid any of the Disney Marvel new heroes. Forget about all of them. He's got a dark background, kind of like Iron Man does, except more so. He's a hitman. He goes out and he kills people. He kills bad people, but he kills people. So let's be explicit here. This is not a series, and this is not a show that's about good guys. It's not about nice people, and nice things don't generally happen. So that's who we're talking about. A monkey that kills assassins, that kills bad people. But that's not what the show is. I mean, there's definitely a lot of gore. There's definitely a lot of violence. There's definitely a lot of adult themes here. This is not for kids, which is so surprising that Marvel even allowed this character to exist. Unlike the Deadpool movies, which we see, and they very often try to go into the deep humor and to try and make us feel like everything's a joke. I mean, Ryan Reynolds does a great job of portraying the merc with a mouth and being a dark character, an anti-hero, a villain of sorts, but yet still a good guy that we can root for. Hit Monkey doesn't quite go in that same direction. Yes, there is humor, but this isn't a big joke. There's a lot of deep themes that are in here, stuck in there. I'm not going to tell you that it's the most brilliant writing I've ever heard of. That's not true. But it takes the material that it has and it runs with it in a solid manner. Far more so than when we watch things like Witcher Origins, Rings of Power, Willow. Most of the crap that's being thrown at us with political ideology behind it, that's not what we're getting here. This isn't some kind of propaganda. This is just entertainment about a dark character. So that's the background about this. Now, I want you to see some of the animation art. I'm a little bit restricted on what I can show because of copyright. I like the animation. It's not perfect by any means, but it is solid. It is entertaining. We get a lot of decent imagery. I mean, we can see the characters, we can get into the world, and it's detailed enough that we get a lot of the background, the ambience, the feel of Japan and the underworld and nature, but yet it's not quite, it's not like they're trying to portray 3D world, our world or any world. There's still a little bit of a comical side to it. Things are exaggerated to a certain extent, but I found it to be appealing. It was just grounded enough to really make it feel kind of modern, kind of now-ish, kind of real-world-ish, but yet also exaggerated in the right ways to take us out of that, to know that this is a fantasy, that this isn't real, that this is an exaggeration of everything. And I think that was really well done. I think the animation is pretty consistent throughout the entire series. The art in terms of the action scenes are fluid enough that you can follow what's happening. You can follow what the characters are fighting and how they are reacting. You never really get lost on where the action is going. It's good direction, as opposed to shaky cam that we often get in many movies these days. And instead of the cut kind of action heroes or action fights that we see in many Marvel movies and most of the J.J. Abrams inspired kinds of TV and movies we see. So I think they got the animation right. They did a good job with that. It's solid, it makes sense, it's consistent, and you can get involved in it. You can follow it without going, this is too cartoonish or this is too serious. It's got enough of a blend of both, which makes it interesting for adults to watch. Let's talk about the voice acting. And I want to go through the characters one by one to go through this series so you'll know exactly who we're talking about. And of course, you can look at Wikipedia, it'll give you a general idea of this, but there are certain characters I want to go over. Now, one of the biggest ones is, believe it or not, there's a human who voice acts for our lead character, the Hit Monkey, which is kind of funny. The Hit Monkey doesn't speak English. Big thing to point out. He never once says a single word in English, which is great. He doesn't say anything in Japanese either, and that's important. Something to know about this show. There are a couple of characters that do understand Hit Monkey. He doesn't have a name. He only goes by Hit Monkey or just Monkey. And this is important because it would be too unrealistic. It would be too distracting, and just, I think it would take you out of it if he could speak entire sentences in English. Instead, they rely on the artwork, they rely on the story and the environment and the action to convey most of the things that the Hit Monkey is going through, the things that he's feeling. You get to see his emotions in the artwork. You get to see it in the way he reacts to events that are happening around him. You get to see it in part because of the interaction with other characters in the show and how they're responding to the various grunts that he's making throughout each episode and throughout the entire series. And I think that's great. I hope that they don't change that. I want this to have a season 2. I think it can go even beyond that, but they got to be careful, because if they try to humanize the monkey more than they have already, it will lose something. He becomes more of a caricature, more of a joke than he does what he is right now, which is still somewhat of a caricature and a joke. But that's the temptation. And God forbid, Marvel loves to fall into their temptations and to run with them. they got to hold that back. This monkey should not be speaking English, nor should we translate what he's saying on a regular basis into English. Although there are certain scenes where we do see the monkey talking to other animals in grunts and noises, and the various animals screech and howl and make their naturalistic sounds that they would make in nature. But we do get a screen on the screen, we do get a translation, a little subtitle that in some instances is telling us what that conversation is between the various animals. All the animals do understand each other. Humans don't really understand any of it, with the exception of the sidekick of Hit Monkey, who is a human being. And I'll get to him in 1 second. But I think that Fred Tastacore has, and I apologize if I get that last name wrong, I think he's a great voice actor. He's done a lot of work here, and even though he doesn't get to use English, I think he does a good job of conveying the emotion through the grunts and various sounds that Hit Monkey makes. And I think it's well matched to the animation and what we're seeing on the screen. So that's kind of cool. In addition, we have another character, Jason Sudeikis. You may have known about him from various things. He plays a titular role. He is the sidekick of Hit Monkey. In fact, he's the guy who brings us into the series. We start off and you would think the show is about him. He's the main character. We see him predominantly throughout the first episode, and everything is being kind of guided from his point of view. In fact, the entire series is essentially from his point of view about what's going on. But that's a subtle misdirection because the series isn't really about him. He's a catalyst for what is happening out there. He's our eyes on everything that's happening for the most part, except when we get monkey-only scenes. But he's our catalyst to keep us going through and to ask some of the questions that we would have about what's going on here. How is this all happening? And why is this happening? And he does a lot of the translation, or he helps us understand what Monkey is saying, even though he's not speaking English, to give us an understanding of, okay, what their conversation back and forth is. And I think Jason Sudeikis does a really good job here because it's essential for him to convey that grunt, that howl, that screech that comes from Hit Monkey into the other half of the conversation, to clue us in on what they're talking about and what argument they may be having or what they're trying to convey. And so it's very important for him not only to have those words because that's written, but also to have the emotion behind it that makes sense. I think the imagery of the character is also good. He's the standard kind of spy, hitman, man in the shadows kind of image in his artwork. And I think that does a great job of conveying that for us to give us that sense of that world, that dark underworld. And I think Jason Sudeikis does a good job of also adding some humor, dark humor almost always, but adding some humor to the character. And as the series goes on, we get to have more insight. There are moments of introspection, both for Hit Monkey, believe it or not, but also for his main character. And by the way, his main character is Bryce. That's the name of the hitman that we're introduced to first. He's very much kind of like the character Archer in that TV series, in the eponymous series, but different, very different. He's not quite as much of a joke. He's not quite as much of a over-the-top kind of individual. He's close to over-the-top in some of his scenes, but not quite there. He's still believable within the world that they are establishing. He's not superhuman. He's not a superhero. He's got flaws and limitations. He's just good at what he does as a hitman. And he's troubled as well. Almost from the beginning, they're always going into that. And I'll get into that more in the themes and the morality of the show, because it does have strong themes and strong morality. And he's definitely not a child-friendly character. Again, this isn't a kid show. This is for adults. It's meant to be. So I think he did a great job, and I think he's a really good portrayal of Bryce. Now, another key character is Akiko, and Olivia Munn plays that character. She's not known for her voice acting, per se. A lot of people may know her from her early career in Attack of the Show in G4, the original, not the remake, but the original. And she's done a few movies previously, and like X-Men Apocalypse, she was Psylocke, which I thought was a decent appearance. She's not known for being a serious, dramatic actress or having serious roles, but she's good at what she does. But in the show, in portraying Akiko, I think she's a critical part. And I like her voice acting in that. She's a bit more subdued. She's the main love interest in the story. She has a critical role as the story goes further, but she's a source of sympathy, empathy. We can relate to her. And the voice acting from Olivia Munn is interesting. We get Akiko is an activist, because every TV show these days has to have an activist, no matter what the format it may be in. Activism is absolutely important. And of course, they do go into some of the politics there, but it makes sense for the story. Again, this isn't American politics, although that slips in. This is happening in Japan. And she is an interesting character. She doesn't have an accent, although most of the characters don't have an accent in terms of Japanese. The Japanese characters don't really have Japanese accents. So it's perfectly fine that Olivia Munn as Akiko doesn't have that Japanese accent. Only one character, one of the main characters really, that we see often, really has an accent. Everyone else, not so much. And so it's kind of interesting. I thought she does a decent job. She does a decent job. I'm not overwhelmed by her character, especially in the first episode. I found her a little bit annoying in the first episode, but then came to appreciate her more as the series went on, as she gained a bigger role, as her character fleshed out based on the things that were happening around her and how she was reacting to it. A couple of things that towards the end of the series, the first season, didn't quite make all the sense, but good enough. And I thought Olivia Munn did a decent job, but this is a character, Akiko, that grows on you as the series goes on. She isn't really that standout, but I thought Olivia Munn did a decent job with her. One of the other big female characters, and there are several female characters, three major characters in this show, in this series, are focused on women, which we have seen very often in many TV shows these days. Thankfully, they're not the caricatures that we see in, say, Witcher Origins, in Velma, and other series like that. They're not meant to be the main character. They're not meant to be the main motivation. They're not meant to be the center of the series. They're not. The center of the series is Hitmonkey and his sidekick, Bryce. Thank God. But Ali Maki Matsuruma, Ali Maki, the key actress here, she's really interesting as a character. She's a secondary character that has some importance as the show goes on, but she gives us a very interesting insight into police work, into being a small town girl in a large Japanese city. Someone who has a really, really good heart. I mean, she's that by-the-book, pure soul in the dirty world of politics and police work that we often see. The classic kind of character. And she goes down that classic kind of route to an extent. But I thought it was a really good character that she did come off as genuine. Her naivete makes sense for the character that she is. It makes sense that she has a solid core of goodness, that her own moral code is very strong. and it comes across very clearly. Her character makes, well, most of the things she does make sense, that she would react in the way she does throughout the series in the various situations that she finds herself in, some of them being pretty extreme and some of them kind of dark. For the most part, she makes a lot of sense. And I think that her portrayal by Ali Mackey comes across in the voice acting. Again, a decent job, not standout, not stellar, but decent and solid. It makes sense. You do have a feeling for this character, and you do appreciate her character as the series goes on. In the first episode, she seems a bit too naive, but that's kind of what she's supposed to be, and so that makes sense. But I thought she did a great job. Nothing wrong there. The last two major characters are kind of interesting. Nobi Nakanishi, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, is really not well known as an actor. A lot of people don't know him, and you've probably not seen him before, but I like his voice acting. Nobi is the partner of Ali Mackey's character. So he is Ito. He is the veteran, he's a cop, and he's pretty integral in some scenes in the show. He gives us a good understanding of the politics, the police in and out, the inner workings of the police force in the show, why they're acting or reacting in certain ways, the limitations that many of the officers have. Again, he also gives us a bit of the reality of the darkness of the problems that may exist in this world and in the law enforcement that we see, the corruption that exists, and how he's dealt with that. And we find him interesting because he's really, he's the standard caricature of a world-weary cop who's been through it all and been dealing with it. He's got the traditional kinds of flaws that you would expect to see from this kind of character who's been downtrodden, who, is a good guy at heart, but yet he's been hardened by the experiences he's had to go through. Somebody who you can count on, but at the same time, you're a little bit cautious of. And he has an interesting progression through the series, which I think is a bit rushed in some parts. It doesn't quite make as much sense, some of the reactions he has, or to the extreme that he takes them to. But again, this isn't a live action show. This is a cartoon. So again, or an animation. So we kind of go with that. And again, it's in Marvel. So characters make leaps at points in terms of their thinking, their reactions, their logic, but it's not so extreme that it's not believable. There is a root to it. The nice thing is he does a good job of coming off as the world-weary but experienced voice. In the first episode, we get introduced to him very quickly, and how he approaches the world, how he approaches police work, that he's good and efficient, but yet he's reserved because of reasons that we learn about later in the show. And he is driven, although, to be honest, I'd like to have seen him be more passionate. The one thing I would say about Nobi is he does a good job of giving us the world weariness, but not such a great job in giving us the passion. And especially after the first episode, we don't get that deep passion, that hunger that comes out of that first episode, and the things that happen to his character. We just don't get that impact. I don't feel it as strong. So that would be a critique I would have of how he portrayed it, especially the first two episodes, maybe three, and then he falls in place in the story. And his attitudes, his reactions seem to fit very well within there. And his actions, even later in the episodes, make sense for the kind of character we've established. His voice acting, again, is good. I would say it's very serviceable with those tweaks that Nobi needs to work more on conveying his passion through his voice, although we see it more so in the art, but not so much in the voice acting. Finally, the last main character we see throughout the series is George Takei, who is playing Shinji. Now, this is an important character throughout the entire series, and it's incredibly telegraphed. I mean, you just knew who the Shinji was pretty much from the end of episode 1. It was pretty clear, definitely in episode 2. You can see the foreshadowing. You can follow where his character is going. You have a pretty good idea of who he is. But George Takei surprisingly taking on a Japanese accent that most people aren't familiar with. So George Takei has a very distinguished voice. It is a very clear voice. I mean, he stands out. When you hear him speak in many events and venues, you know it's George Takei. Most people haven't heard him speak with somewhat of a Japanese accent. And that kind of stands out. It makes the voice familiar, but yet throws you off because you know who it is, but you're not familiar with them in that way. Mind you, it's not a deep accent, it's not a huge accent, but it's there, and it throws you off a little bit. And in fact, I had to look it up initially when I was first watching the series to go, I know that voice, but it's not placing it because of that accent. It's just off a little. Who is this? And that's when I realized it was George Takei. Thankfully, in this series, George Takei does not bring any of his crazy political ideology. Now, you may love George Takei's ideology, and if you're watching the show because you're looking for him to be that same kind of political activist, you will be disappointed. I am happy that he doesn't bring that political ideology into the character. Again, there is a touch of the more left-leaning ideology within Olivia Munn's character, Akiko, but again, it's held back. It's not over the top. This show really isn't political. It really isn't left versus right. It's entirely different. The theme and the plot go in entirely different ways, but there is that slight element there. Thankfully, it's not coming from George Takei. In fact, he seems to be a limiting factor on the desire of Olivia Munn's character of Akiko of wanting to go further and further in that political extreme, and he's the one trying to pull her back, which is absolutely different than what happens in the real world. George Takei is way out there, and nobody can pull him back. But that's what I like about this. To that end, I have to give George Takei some props here. I have to give him some credit because he's not being George Takei. He's being Shinji in the show. He's actually doing good acting in that he is portraying this character. And he does a decent job of showing us a very experienced politician. He does a good job of showing us someone who's been working his way through and working his way up amongst the political channels. And he gives us a hint of the ambition that might be there, the desire to see success happen on the issues that that matter to him. How far will he go? The character is a bit weak, and he's meant to be. His voice acting kind of gives us a feeling of world weariness, which doesn't really convey, it isn't really conveyed in the artwork that we see. Yes, it's an older character, but he doesn't strike us as being as unsure. His voice is too aware of what's going to happen next. His voice acting is too, and maybe that was on purpose. Maybe George Takei wanted to give us hints that this guy isn't as wishy-washy as perhaps his words are saying, because his voice doesn't match that. His voice isn't really unsure or unsteady, which you would expect in the initial episodes for him to be. There's a lot more confidence in him. And maybe that's, again, going towards where the series goes, and that's meant to be a foreshadowing. Or maybe it's just George Takei and his nature coming across, and so he can't sublimate that in his acting. I don't know. But it's a decent voice acting job, and again, he's one of the few characters that have a Japanese accent that is in the show. Almost everyone else speaks basically pure English with very little accent. There is some from Ali Mackey. We do see that she has more, but she's meant to be a country yokel in the big city, so she's got more of a country accent. And George Takei has a very refined accent, which to an extent in Japanese society, in terms of politics, in terms of his age, is more understandable. But he does a good job of being that refined voice, distinct voice. And George Takei does some credibility on that. So again, I give him that accountance. So those are the main characters. And that's the characters, that's the voice acting in the show. I think they do a good job of that. The animation art was, again, pretty solid throughout. Really no big questions there. And the art direction, how we get from scene to scene, overall is done pretty well. Makes sense. You're not suddenly thrown into situations that don't make sense, like how did they get there, unless it's naturally part of the action in the show where you're supposed to be unsure because the characters are unsure. So other than that, it does make sense. We do have a good flow. So that brings me to the themes about the show. And especially in the themes in the early part of the series, in episode 1 in particular, what's our theme? What was the overriding theme of the show? Revenge. It's pretty straightforward. This is an action show, an action fantasy. Even though it's in the animation style and anime style, it's all about revenge. It is about anger. It is about righting a wrong of a sort. And it becomes more than that, less than that, throughout the show. And it's not perfect in that, no one is untouched by violence. No one is untouched by anger. No one is untouched by revenge and the consequences therein. And I think that's very important because while revenge is their motivation, it's not just what happens. It isn't, oh, we're going for revenge, good on us, that's the end of the show. No. There are consequences, and I think the show is very good in showing us what happens because of the revenge, because of the anger that they're going through and they have to deal with. We see the consequences of that. And I think that's what makes this show work. It's not just that one note. There are other elements to it that I think are very important and actually come through. Again, we're not talking about Oscar-winning writing, but the writers deserve credit. They thought about this series. They thought about the motivations of each and every one of the characters, and they made it essential that we could see them as more than just superficial, two-dimensional characters. They have depth. Even the monkey has depth. And I think it's a wonderful theme. Can you go back home? What did you lose? What did it cost you to make a decision here or there? Is revenge in and of itself worth it? Just to have the revenge. Is anger enough to live off of? And that kind of brings us to the other thing of morality, which is going hand in hand with the theme of revenge. There is the morality theme throughout the show. Yes, it's a dark show. It's a black comedy at points. It's dark in all of its aspects, but it's also moral. It tells us about the morality of the revenge, of killing, of being a hitman, whether it's a hitman against villains or just a hitman in general, and just violence in general. It gives us a morality here. because at many points they are going back and saying, you know what, it isn't worth it. There's a cost to this, and the cost is intensely high. We especially get this from Bryce at various points throughout the series, where he just reveals his true feelings, his true motivations, his true background, and he shares that with Monkey, and Monkey has his own revelations that he is sharing throughout the show and throughout the series through his actions and the consequences of that. So while the theme is revenge, the morality is that's not good. It is definitely a black and white, good and bad, good and evil kind of morality. Evil unto others is a seed that returns a fruit that is bitter, and we get that. And I think that's actually refreshing, because all too often we see our anti-heroes and we see them as good guys with no real negative consequences. I mean, even thinking of two of the more popular anti-heroes recently, in recent memory, would be Wolverine and Deadpool. They're both anti-heroes. They're both violent. They both at times have gone and used revenge as their motivation for things that they're doing, and they have little to no consequence on that. There's almost no pushback against what they do, especially if you think of Deadpool, the first Deadpool movie. Yeah, it's a revenge plot. He's absolutely out to get Francis, and where's his negative consequences? What did it cost him at the end of the first movie of Deadpool? Really didn't cost him anything. At the end of the day, he gets the girl, he beats the bad guy, he wins. But Deadpool's not a nice guy. Deadpool isn't a good person. He's not. He's an anti-hero, absolutely. He has aspirations to be a nice guy. He has a code of conduct, fantastic, but he's not a good guy. And yet, he gets good outcomes over and over again. We don't see that in Hit Monkey. That's not what the theme is here. Yeah, Hit Monkey has good aspirations at times. He has a motivation that we can justify, and the first episode does a great job of clarifying why would he want revenge. I'm absolutely behind Hit Monkey. I want him to get that justice too. I want him to get his revenge. It makes sense. You empathize with him and say, yes, go get them. I get it. Bryce, to a lesser extent, yeah, we get him too. It makes sense why they want to do the things they do throughout the rest of the series, and you empathize with them, but at no point is anyone saying that they're good people, that they're doing good things. They're not. All the characters do recognize that, and there are consequences to the actions that they take. They get to feel the impact of what they did, and several times throughout the series, good and bad actions have a consequence down the road that they have to deal with. Because there are good things that they do, in particular in the code, I believe that was episode 4, with Monkey, where he has a code he lives by. There are certain rules that he has, and we see some of the consequences of that. Of course, most of the good consequences are pretty much in that one episode, and everything else is, well, everything else is everything else. I'm trying to not go through too much of the series. I don't want to give away spoilers to this. I want you to see it for yourself. But, it is good that we see the theme playing against the morality of the show, and that they are aware that even though they're talking about anti-heroes, even though we can feel the motivation there, without being preachy, they're still telling us, no, these things don't match up. This isn't right. And I like that they're not preaching at us about this, that they're not beating us over the head saying, don't you get it? Don't you understand? Here's the morality. Do you get the morality? Do you agree with our political opinion? No, don't do that. Something that we've seen so often, especially recently, Witcher Origins. I keep mentioning that, but these are the extreme examples. Witcher Origins, Rings of Power, Velma. They just beat us over the head over and over, and they're not the only shows. Gotham Knights is yet another one. Batwoman is yet another one beating us over the head. Do you get it? Please, we're adults. We get it. You don't have to beat us over the head every single line, every single episode. And that's another great thing about Hit Monkey. They treat the public, the viewer, like you're intelligent. They treat you like an adult, that you will get it. They don't have to explain every single line, every single motivation, every single thought and feeling running through the heads of every single character at every single moment. They let you be an adult, that you can put it together and follow through without it every single second being explained to you. So that's kind of cool. I like that about the show. Overall, let's talk a little bit about episode 1. And again, if you like this discussion, then we can always talk about more of the series. And I've been talking about most of the series overall, but let's talk about episode 1. I think episode 1 does a good job. We start off with Bryce as the main character. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but Bryce is our central figure. And he's an important figure because he's our POV. He is our point of view. We get to see the world mostly through his eyes and how he portrays it, which we quickly understand isn't exactly correct. Bryce is a flawed character, no doubt. They make that instantly and abundantly clear, that Bryce has issues, he has problems, that his life and his life choices have weighed on him substantially, and that he is looking for an outlet. Whether it's a way, not so much a way out. Bryce isn't trying to give up or turn a leaf here. He's not trying to become a good guy or a different guy. He just wants to have an acceptance, to an outlet, a friend. He wants something, and he can't get it because of the lifestyle that he leads and the lack of trust that he has and his other issues. He can't get there. And so he has to sublimate that. And he has to try and substitute that through various means. We get it. And again, that was really well done by Jason Sudeikis in giving us that kind of understanding of the character emotionally and some humor in there, and leaning a bit into the Archer style of television when Archer was good, seasons 1, 2, 3, where we're seeing that there's some humor in there, and it's an off-color kind of dark humor, but it works. He has a hit job, and there are consequences. And again, the show is intelligent enough to make the consequences make sense. They show us the scenario, they show us a consequence. They don't have to explain it all in hyper detail, repeating it every 3 lines every time a character shows up on the screen. They make it clear. And these consequences continue throughout the entire series. It makes sense enough for what we are watching. And he winds up being introduced to Monkey and Monkey's tribe. And I think it's a great interplay because we get more of that pacifist mentality. We are suddenly clashed with a hitman versus pacifism, and how do those two things come together? Where does it mix? Where does it not mix? And it's a little bit Archer-esque in terms of being a bit over the top in certain scenes and how Bryce is reacting to the situation overall. We get to understand the motivations of Monkey, the differences of Monkey versus the rest of his tribe, his interactions with his tribe, the way that he feels about the tribe, the way the tribe feels about him, the conflicts that existed long before Bryce ever showed up makes sense. So we can understand why Monkey is acting the way he does and how he later reacts in terms of what happens to his tribe and to Bryce that kickstarts the rest of the series. It makes sense. And so when we see that Monkey suddenly is doing things that no monkey should possibly do, we just go with it. It fits. It's not so extreme that we're suddenly going, a monkey can't do that. A monkey wouldn't do that. A monkey doesn't have the intelligence or the way to convey these things. No. it does make sense. It flows nicely so that it doesn't break the immersion in this universe. You can follow it and you go with it, and it never breaks you out and go, that just isn't going to happen. That's just not possible. That's just too extreme or too ridiculous to be accepted. They do a good job of that. And so we get to see, what are these people? We understand who Bryce is by the end of the episode. We understand who Bryce is. We understand Bryce's flaws. We understand that there's more to Bryce than just being a hitman, than just being greedy. There's more to him than that. We understand by the end of the episode that Monkey isn't just a monkey, and he's not just a little different than everyone else. And that exception, that difference in him at his core is something that's going to motivate the rest of the series. And we understand by the end of episode 1, revenge makes sense. It's justified, or at least you can empathize with the justification for revenge and absolute violence to get that revenge. It makes sense. And then the dominoes start falling, because it's never just that simple. It doesn't end there. There is a theme that runs throughout the series that violence begets violence, essentially. And it does. And it makes sense. So again, there's a lot of themes that we've heard in other shows that are presented very preachily, that are meant to beat it over our head. And those themes still exist, but they're much more better conveyed. They are much more adult in the manner that they're conveyed. There's more thinking that has gone into the writing, the art direction, the voice acting than we have seen in many live action shows that just don't work. The writing is so far superior in Hitmonkey than almost everything that's out there now. Again, I am limited in what I see, so maybe there are other programs that are great. I don't know of them. I don't watch them. But I did watch Hitmonkey. So I can go more into the various characters, the various episodes, the various themes. I can go deeper into that if you want. And I can do a deeper review of season 1 or episode 1 if you want. Let me know in the likes, in the comments, and I will make time to make sure to do that. I know I usually have big gaps in what I present to you, but I apologize. But I will make time if you want to go over episode by episode of Hitmonkey in season 1. And I want you to know there is a season 2, and I am interested. I am looking forward to seeing that. And if the writers and the artists are paying attention, if Marvel is paying any kind of attention whatsoever, please guys, don't screw this up. Don't get preachy. Don't start going the same road that we've seen in Marvel Phase 4 in the movies. Don't go in the direction that we've seen in Disney, in the Disney Plus series on the Disney Channel. Don't go down that road. Don't become preachy. Don't go all left-wing. Don't go and push identity, gender politics down our throat. It won't work. Don't ruin the show. With that all said, you know what? I like this show. I enjoyed it. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful time to binge the whole thing, watch the show, and really appreciate it. And that's why I wanted to talk about it more. I hope you enjoy it as well, as much as I do. If you don't, tell me why. If you think I missed something major about one of the characters, let me know. And again, if you want me to do more of this, tell me, and I will make time for it. But otherwise, I hope you watch Hitmonkey. Enjoy that, and I'll talk to you again very soon.